Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Most welcome to our FDI panel. Here I really want to express gratitude to Mr. Tsomokos and his very dedicated and successful team of experts in working and setting up this conference and making it work, and doing so for the last 20 years. And our constitution actually lasts shorter than the tradition of this conference. And one of the few things that have lasted for 20 years, we're not like England. So 20 years is great tradition here, In any case, I have particular pleasure to announce Mrs. Dubravka Negre, the director, head of the regional office of the Western Balkans European Investment Bank. His Excellency and my old friend from the old days, 15 years ago, Ambassador Carlo Cascio, Mr. Richard Robinson of the British-Serbian Business Chamber, and a big friend of Serbia, very active, and Mr. Dejan Turk, long-standing director of Austria Telekom here in Serbia, vice president of the board of directors of the FIC, and VIP of Mobile A1 Telekom Slovenia. So, Mr. Nedimovic could not come, and our plan today is to discuss FDI in Serbia, and not only in Serbia, in the situation of the pandemic. So to start talking, maybe first institutionally, the European Investment Bank has projects which support the creation of a better investment climate. So Dubravka, can you elaborate a little bit on this topic, please?
Thank you, and I would like to greet all the participants and as well to extend my compliments to organizers for the long-standing existence of this conference. Well, thank you very much for that, Milan, and for introduction. As you know, the European Investment Bank is the largest multilateral financial institution in the world, and the EU Bank actually finances projects in this region since 1977. Actually, and so far we have extended some 12 billion euros of financing to the region of the Western Balkans, of which some 6 billion or over 6 billion euros to Serbia. Our projects and all of our projects support creation of the better investment climate. And how? Well, basically, we are building better road infrastructure, and we are supporting the connectivity of the region, which is very important for attracting FDIs. We are reviving railway system and improving the waterway navigation, which of course helps the private investors when they think whether to invest in a certain country. They of course take this aspect, how they will move their goods around and eventually export them from Serbia, right? If there's export supported activities. We're supporting reforms in regulatory and legal sector as well, as it increases confidence of the investors. We have just completed recently the modernization and the upgrade of the largest court institution in Serbia, which is the Palace of Justice, basically improving and providing modern IT systems as well to help the justice reform in Serbia, and to make sure that citizens have, and companies as well, better, hopefully, access to justice. We are basically selecting the most solid and sustainable investors that receive the proof of quality and high standards, and which are meeting the criteria of the EU, and Serbia is in the EU integration process, so it's something very important. We are encouraging innovation by investing in science and technology infrastructure and business for innovative entrepreneurs, and that there are also world-based companies or foreign companies that have created their IT in Serbia. I have just returned today from Niš, where Serbia has completed with our financing the extension of the electrical engineering faculty in Niš, and we actually saw there a Swedish company that is operating out of the Science and Technology Park in Niš. We are financing the construction in general of better infrastructure that should ideally increase, and that it does increase economic resilience of Serbia, especially in let's say this type of crisis, including the pandemic. We are supporting the digitalization and introduction of IT skills and equipment in schools across Serbia, and even higher education institutions, which increases the competences for the future generation. And we have actually just signed today a new investment of 65 million euros for what we call a process of digitalization of schools across Serbia. More than 1,000 private and primary and secondary schools will have a better, faster internet connections, including all the IT equipment that comes with it, to enable the learning at distance, and to, of course, also equip teachers with the knowledge they need to have in order to provide learning which involves the IT skills. This is why this is important. It's important because it creates a labor force of future generations that will be there available to also investors coming to Serbia, because if Serbia would like to attract the high quality investment in the sense of the skills, and to create a larger and a more important value added economically, it also needs to have available a skilled force for that, and to base its economy on knowledge. What and how we support the investment projects in terms of the benefits? Well, of course, we provide attractive interest rates with flexible structures for investors as well, including the private sector, where we finance a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises by facilitating the credit lines. We enjoy, of course, the highest credit rating in the market, and we obtain financing at the best rates in capital markets. And being non-profitable organization of the EU, we make these rates available to our clients, to the borrowers, net of the bank's cost and risk pricing where it applies. We provide long maturities, of course, which are needed in the markets such as Serbia, where access to long-term funding is not, let's say, readily available, although this has improved in the past years. We are financing industrial projects as well, or large projects that require a long-term stable involvement of the lender with long maturities. So let's say the corporate financing, of course, can be extended to above typical 7 years. You can go to 10 or 12 years, knowing that infrastructure projects such as road and rail, we can finance up to 30 years, which is, of course, very interesting for the country, if the country is the investor. We basically, of course, intervene in the larger projects, above typically 25 million euros. Just to mention the largest corporate loan we have supported in Serbia some time ago, a few years ago, it was the modernization and the upgrade of the Fiat car factory, which was and still is the largest the FDI in Serbia as a whole. We are basically supporting wide range and type of investments, and we can finance, of course, companies or fixed assets, as well as our research and development projects.
Do you do public-private partnerships? Do you do water treatment facilities? Are you interested in doing that? Are you interested in improving the quality of the air, financing projects for filtration of for example, this tragic situation that we have in many cities in Serbia of poor air. So we have just two problems in Serbia. We don't have clean water and no clean air. Everything else is perfect. So joking. So are you thinking, because it's quite complicated, those PPP projects are quite complicated and they're slow. So we could work basically on speeding up those processes, maybe improving the legislation further on. So we really need to go into serial development of PPPs for water treatment and air pollution.
Yes, especially in the time of quite important fiscal constraints, right? Such as this pandemic has provoked that the country, yes, Serbia included, has large deficits, and it will be more and more difficult to finance publicly investment projects. So to answer to your question very simply, the answer is yes. We are one of the largest financiers of PPPs in Europe, in Western Europe in particular, which is, of course, the most developed market in the whole world for PPPs. And there, on average per year, before UK left the EU, we've been providing around 2 billion euros per year just for PPPs and project finance structures. So yes, we are very experienced in that. We also have the European Advisory Hub for PPPs sitting in the EIB. So it's basically a group of professionals that have high experience in PPP projects and that are there actually to advise the governments to structure better PPPs, but not necessarily that much on project per project basis, but rather more on really institutional and regulatory side. So we have helped the Serbian government basically make an update or amendment of the latest PPP law to be more in line with the EU acquis, because of course we have a great experience of what the PPP laws look like in France or Netherlands or Belgium, the largest PPP markets in Europe. And we are also currently actually on the project basis are advising the Ministry of Construction and Infrastructure and Transport on the future PPP of the Port of Smederevo. We are financing through public investment, the basic infrastructure of a port of Smederevo. But since these typically investments do attract private investors for everything that is above basic infrastructure, for basically operating the port, maintaining the port, and bringing some other additional investments that are not considered basic infrastructure, we are advising the ministry how to structure this concession in the best interest of the public sector. So yes, when it comes to the water, quality of air, or climate change in general, the EIB has adopted just end of the last year its climate policy, which basically is transforming. We are transforming ourselves to the climate EU bank. Because this is something that will be extremely important, a roadmap for all our group. And we would like to represent a blueprint to tackle the environmental crisis throughout Europe and more 150 countries where we operate, and basically to help the transition to net zero emissions and climate resilient EU economy by 2050. This is what we have committed ourselves in front of the EU legislator, including the European Parliament, of course, European Commission, and more importantly, our member states, the EU member states. But besides, of course, the EU supporting this region to this climate transition neutrality, improving, as you said, the environmental protection, quality of air is something that will be extremely important because Europe doesn't stop at its borders, as you know. The rivers continue to flow to this region, for example, Danube including, which is crossing so many European countries. Air continues to fluctuate. So if you have of course, a very polluting a coal-fired power plant, it will pollute not only within your borders, it will also pollute elsewhere. So going back to the water, we have signed this year 35 million euros facility with the city of Belgrade to actually help the municipality of Palilula, which is very large, as you know, to actually get the system of water purification system, which would actually prevent for dirty water to be discharged in Danube, which is actually where most of the municipality is located. Indeed, and we're helping the city of Novi Sad also to acquire its new wastewater treatment plant, which will be the largest investment of the city next year of 60 million euros. And I would like to emphasize that we are doing or supporting the preparation of these projects through grants, through EU grants, so the grant money, the free money to prepare these projects so that then later we can support them in financing.
Gentlemen, I think that we're all so humbled by Dubravka's work that we can stop the session now. She's doing everything. Is there anything on earth that you're not doing? It's amazing. You're the main reformer. I mean, the EIB is doing a fantastic job completely. So
is the EU on the back of us? Yes.
Is the EU behind you? Absolutely. So, Mr. Ambassador, Carlo, you are the proud 20% by number of investors. Italy is the home country of 20% of investors in Serbia. That is very, Italy is by numbers the most numerous investor in Serbia with about 20%. Then comes Germany with about 16.5%. And then surprisingly, United States with 7.2% by numbers. That is interesting that the United States have 7% by numbers. In terms of quantity, in terms of value of the investment, Italy actually comes on the third place after Germany and China. And I know, Carlo, that your team has conducted a thorough survey of investors, of Italian investors in Italy. So please tell us, how does it work? Of course, the flagship is Fiat, and there is a number of car suppliers also working here, but textile companies, shoe companies, sock companies, all kinds of Italian companies, middle-size, small companies. Tell us what are their experiences and how do you see the future under these extraordinary circumstances?
Thank you, Milan, for your questions. Let me join Dubravka in greeting all the other distinguished panelists, and also to commend the commitment of the organizers that for 20 years have been promoting this very remarkable event. You're right, we are still among the main foreign investors in this country and the second trade partner. And in my view, even the current crisis, Serbia has many things to offer to many European and American companies. For example, the need to rebuild the shortened value chains could certainly advantage those countries like Serbia that are closer to the EU market and have positive business environment and reward the FDIs with incentive schemes. Moreover, Serbia and all Western Balkan countries are starting to develop on their own a richer and more attractive internal market. And thanks to growing households' income, consumption is increasing, and the supply generated by private firms will always try to satisfy the general demand. In this framework, there is a question mark. Some commentators are saying that the current crisis, which was provoked by a pandemic and which, again, turned into a plunge in the FDI, could be indeed be V-shaped. Although not all of them agree on this, so growth could relatively soon return to Serbia and FDIs will continue to flow. Having said that, I can assure you that many of them will still come from Italy, because this crisis, despite the very negative circumstances in which we have been working through all of these months, has shown how strong and stable is the economic relations between Italy and Serbia. And as always used to say, we are here to stay. Our companies are here to stay in Serbia. Although there were some negative consequences and the bilateral trade slightly diminished, Italy, as I said, is still among the first investors in Serbia and the second economic partner. You kindly reminded some important figures. And considering the current circumstances, I think that this has been quite an extraordinary result, which was made possible by a persisting commitment of both countries, because this is important to understand that there is a joint effort beyond all of this at the institutional level, and above all by the tireless activity of many private entrepreneurs. So the interest of the Italian companies for Serbia has never diminished. Of course, some initiative and projects have been delayed since it's difficult to travel and organize some gathering as we used to do, fairs and other events. However, Italian companies know well that their recovery depends on the ability to internationalize their presence abroad through export, but also through the opening of new branches in strategic locations, and our government is supporting very much this effort of export-oriented companies. The Italian companies already working in Serbia know very well that this country remains an ideal destination for foreign direct investment, coming from Italy, of course, in first place, for many reasons: historical ties, geographical proximity, access to international market. It is not by chance that Italy is still one of the top investors in this country. And with regard to this, I'm proud to say that the Italian embassy, together with the Italian Chamber of Commerce, has recently published a study on the Italian economic presence in Serbia with some very interesting and remarkable figures. The study is titled Italijanska preduzeća u Serbiji, priča o uspjehu. It's providing, as I was saying, precise data on the relevance and the dimension of the Italian businesses in Serbia. I will briefly quote some of these figures just to let you understand what we are talking about. We have more than 1,600 registered companies with shares of Italian capital, out of which 588 have structured a continuous activity, and more than 50,000 jobs created by our companies. Presence is in numerous sectors: agribusiness, automotive, textile, IT, manufacturing, and of course, financial and insurance services, where we have a clear leadership thanks to Banca Intesa, Unicredit, Unipol, and Generali. And on the top of that, we are almost everywhere around Serbia, from Subotica down to Venie, passing through the rest of the country. So I would like to invite all of you to have a look to this very interesting study that you could easily get on our website. What are the challenges? What are the problems? And where are the opportunities? I was referring to the fact that being such a close market, being such integrated economy in the European ones, and especially in that one of Italy and Germany, Serbia is a natural destination for companies coming from Italy. And I have to tell you that despite this very problematic months, we have been receiving so many requests from Italian companies who wanted to come and to have a look. We were supposed to be probably the first country at the agriculture fair in Novi Sad this year, which unfortunately didn't take place. And there are other things in the pipeline. Of course, we have to wait for the situation to restart the usual contact. And what I can tell you, because despite the difficulties, I've been talking with video calls to our companies in the last 6-7 months instead of having them here in the embassy as we used to do. And they were very committed, and no one of them fired employees. They, as I told you, they are very much interested in staying. They were pleased with the financial support provided by the Serbian government at the beginning of the crisis of the pandemic in Serbia. So far we haven't, to be very open, we haven't detected any major trouble between, let's say, the Italian business community as a whole and the Serbian counterpart. Those who are doing business here, a very good business, they are pretty satisfied. Certainly, there are things that need to be improved already. Dubravka mentioned some of the areas in which something better could be done, but certainly we are here to assist and to improve. And this is, we are working in a logic of mutual satisfaction, I would say. I mean, this is not the one-way a partnership, quite the opposite, because the contribution that Serbian authorities are giving is relevant, very much appreciated. Just to remember that Serbian government is one of the stakeholders in the Fiat investment, which is something that will certainly continue, and we will see new investments coming and in the future months. So no doubt about that. So generally, our experience has been extremely positive. The trend is, despite the circumstances, is still quite rewarding. We have to consider that China trade exchange with Serbia didn't suffer as we and Germany suffered because of the pandemic. So there is at some point during the year head-to-head between our export and Chinese export, but overall we are the second partner in a position which is extremely important to us. And of course, Serbian authorities are looking very closely, following very closely what's happening in Germany and Italy these days, because they do count a lot on the recoveries of our economies in order to give further boost to the Serbian economy. They did pretty well this year, despite the circumstances, but of course, a lot will depend on also what the European economies, how the European economies will react and will recover. So we are in close contact with all of them, both the government and the companies. There are still challenges ahead. Certainly, we would like to see more reforms in place, and that's why we support very much Serbia's accession process. This is not something, we are not certainly doing a favor or a gift to Serbia and majority of Western Balkans countries, but this is a mutual interest. Both sides, neither the member states nor Serbia and the other countries in the region have a plan B to full integration to the European Union. So it's a very long, complex process, but I think that we are all in this together, and also I think that solidarity that you show to Serbia and the other countries in the region proved once again how close is this long-standing relationship. Italy is one of the key countries in supporting this effort. So I would say, to sum up, so far so good, but we don't want to underestimate the challenges. But still, the opportunities are here. This is a very good regional platform. There is quite a potential here that could be, better used by all of us in order to improve standards of life, prosperity, and stability in Serbia and the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. This was a very thorough exposition of both the business situation and at the end, a policy statement of the Italian state, obviously, on support of Serbia. And, we always feel this very strong support and, as you said, partnership that comes from Italy to Serbia, and we reciprocate. We love eating pizza. you know. So so this you know, it is surprising actually the level of investment which Serbia has achieved in the last couple of years is truly surprising compared to the levels of investment that we remember from 2004, 2005, 2006.
Sure.
It is incomparable. And the results, when you look just at the results that Serbia has made in terms of investment, that is remarkable. Had it made such progress in terms of rule of law, we would have been probably ahead of Switzerland a little bit.
Milan, if I may, very last thing, you rightly mentioned the beginning of the last decade. And in those days, when we were working together with different functions, both of us, I used to stress one very important point, that in those days, and they were equally challenging and difficult as the current ones for different reasons, of course. Italy was the very first country which decided to make that remarkable political and economic investment here in Serbia when no one else, in a time when no one else dared to even think about it. And nowadays, although situation, as I said, is far from being completely satisfactory, we see how far-reaching that decision by Italy was.
And I will remember till I'm living the meeting that we had with Mr. Silvio Berlusconi in 2006, I think. That was the most fascinating political experience that I had in my life. It was completely amazing. Mr. Turk, running for a long time, a company which is very specific, highly technological, very much retail-oriented, very much regulated. What is your experience of working in Serbia? The competition must be strong, I'm sure. It's not easy, but you're managing very well. So tell us about your experience in this specific industry and anything else that you would remark in terms of the FDIs in Serbia, and particularly in the context of the current moment of the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Maybe in the beginning, before talking a little bit about my business and our challenges, I would a little bit like to talk about FITS and our members. And we just had this huge event. Luckily, we couldn't take it in
the Foreign Investors Council.
The Foreign Investors Council. We just had this huge event, the launch of the White Book, which basically is the biggest activity we have. All of our members give input. It's now an activity since 2003, and we could make a hybrid form of this event. With all safety measures, we could have a video streaming. We had the Prime Minister, is Brnabić there, and we were streaming to more than 400 kind of participants. And it is, for us, let's say, the biggest thing we do. It is recommendations, which hopefully are followed to some extent by the government. We had more than 270 of them, in the latest White Book. We had a significant progress in about 7% of these. In about 34%, we had certain progress.
Just to make it clear for our audience, you had 270 requests for improvements of various regulations, procedures, basically activities of the state. And in the last year, you had significant progress in about 7% of these.
We had significant progress in 7%, and about in 34% we have a certain progress, but still almost 60% there was very little progress. The main progress was on law notaries, oil and gas sector and the tobacco industry. There are some challenges in terms of labor legislation, taxes, and public procurement. So this is a little bit, in a nutshell, this latest event we had. So still, I think some form of significant room for improvement in many areas.
And did you raise that issue with the representatives of the state, and how did they respond to this?
But in general, we have a very good working climate with them. We have different, committees where we regularly meet. And we, of course, would like to see, that, the reforms would be faster and, at a much faster pace, especially, in some priorities we put forward. So these priorities are, taxes, it is labor law, law on inspection, food safety, infrastructure, and real estate and banking, So here we would like to see really, much faster reforms moving forward.
From my experience, work through committees is quite ineffective because often in those committees you get junior representatives of the industry or law firms and so forth, because it's quite often that partners in law firms, for example, are busy with transactional work, and then they send younger lawyers to work on reform things. On the other hand of the committee, you have often representatives in the ministry who cannot decide. So from my experience, if you want really to change something, this has to be done on the top level, nothing below the level of ministry, and then it can be done effectively. So probably, you could pick up 10 most pressing issues and go directly yourself, go to the minister with senior lawyers, explain things, and then you could maybe change things within 3 months.
Yes, I would totally agree. This is what we do, more or less. We are all, from the board personally, pretty much involved in doing this issue. I must say, we have always the attention of the Prime Minister at our events, and, we have her 100% attention. So that, of course, creates a lot of momentum, that things move forward. And generally, we are satisfied. We're not that unsatisfied. I said out of 270 proposals, 40%, showed some improvement. And, still we would like to see that this goes faster, but, it moves.
It is this year is completely extraordinary, so it's not exemplary.
Yeah. But otherwise, of course, foreign direct investment has gone down. Here we see a decrease according to our numbers of up to 30%. Here we furthermore see, of course, that it is a European trend, but Serbia is doing at the moment pretty well, I would say. So, we are below these difficult minus averages at the moment. What is important, and, we mentioned it also to the Prime Minister at our event, that we learned out of our huge lockdowns we had as the only one in Europe, back in March and April, and now we see these lockdowns happening everywhere. I'm very happy that obviously Serbia has chosen a way to keep, on one hand, safety, and on the other hand, the economy open. And I think it might even create some kind of advantage, for Serbia in Europe, and also, somehow enhance some additional foreign investments coming in. So hopefully, I shared a little bit, I'm sharing the experience out of Slovenia, since I also manage that country. It is devastating at the moment. We have a lockdown of more than 1 month now. Everything is closed. People cannot move. Businesses are shutting down, and it is really dramatically. So hopefully we will not see such a lockdown happening in Serbia like we see in other countries now.
Yeah, we pray that things get better in at least a few months, if not earlier. Mr. Robinson, it's a pleasure. We just finished one session, and now a second one. Half an hour ago, we had a session from a different conference. So please let us know what is the situation. You are running the British-Serbian Chamber of Commerce. You're very active, trying to strengthen the relations between United Kingdom and Serbia in terms of developing business relations, to align the work of your organization not only with businesses but with other organizations, and to synergize together. So please give us your point of view, and particularly also the specific moment, combination of Brexit on the one hand and COVID on the other hand. How does it all look to our British friends?
Well, thank you, Milan, and thank you to everyone who's organized this 20th conference. This is my first, and I stress how well it's been organized, so thank you. In terms of the view from, shall we say, British-Serbian, the British-Serbian chamber, sort of bridging the two countries from either side of the EU, is somewhat different to Italy and actually for the EIB, because times have moved on for obvious reasons. But in fact, some of the largest British quoted companies are serious investors here. Most obviously British American Tobacco and Rio Tinto, both of whom have major projects. But actually, I think things are changing, some of which is related to the consequences of COVID, and some of which, anyway. Dubravka referred to the demand on of sort of PPP investment relating obviously to wastewater, green energy. These are all things that the British investors are also interested on, and that's also demonstrated by UK Export Finance from not having any interest in this part of the world at all, moving first to some initial exposure and almost immediately deciding to double it to about £5 billion. So there is a change in sentiment in the UK. But coming back to COVID particularly, I think we've just hit an inflection point. Up to now, sort of, shall we say, no one's known what they've been entirely reactive in terms of the curfews, the repeated surges, but with the vaccines being announced, not least as far as Serbia is concerned, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is the easiest to handle and has significant orders from the Serbian government. But I think now foreign investors, or those that are fleet enough of foot, are making some significant decisions. Interestingly, we as a chamber have been approached by investors both in the UK and in Serbia looking to invest in the other country in the last few weeks. Now, that's not going to be something we see in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but these are serious investors that are thinking about the new opportunities. So I think that's really important. I think also it's worth pointing out that the events of the last 6 to 9 months they've more changed, sped up some existing trends than actually created new trends. The sort of things that I would suggest is the impact of online shopping on retail. It was happening anyway, but it has been sped up. I think the use of virtual meetings, virtual conferences has
the world has shrunk, actually.
Sorry?
The world has shrunk. Now
but I think it's also has long-term impact. It's
legitimate now that we operate from all over the world, hold meetings, hold conferences, exchange views. It's very practical. It has sped up definitely the situation.
Absolutely, but I think there's a second aspect, and that is that it's changed the nature of office work. And so the focus is not, no one says, why aren't you in the office now? They say, can you meet on Teams? Can you meet on Zoom or whatever? And so there's a drive towards increased investment in IT infrastructure, again, for people like the EIB, like UK Export Finance, like the EBRD. And I think that's a real change. And the last thing, which was covered by a previous session, is actually the drive to the cashless economy. Last 6 months have been, people have not wanted to handle cash. They've not wanted to even, so actually the use of the cashless means of payment has been driven by sort of people's changed attitude to handling surfaces. But it was there anyway. So I think it's important to understand that these changes, we've had a sort of several years of change shrunk into a period of 6 months.
Yes.
And so smart companies have brought forward their plans to take account of these changes, because in some cases that's made the difference between something become viable as an investment proposition much sooner than a distant plan. So I think so I'm really not surprised now we're getting new inquiries. But as you said, from the UK point of view, there's an additional complication. Shall we say that I was listening to one of our former prime ministers, Gordon Brown, who described it as two cliff edges in a row. But I think it is important. There is additional short-term uncertainty, and sort of given the time, I will not go into any of the detail. What I think is important to stress is what hasn't changed, and that is that the bilateral investment treaty isn't changing. The double taxation treaty isn't changing, and that's actually quite attractive from a quite attractive treaty as far as the UK and Serbia is concerned. Obviously, things that are changing is the bilateral trading relationship, and of course, first and foremost, the EU-UK future trading relationship. I'm not going to go there. Many people have talked about this in great detail, and you can all read the newspapers. But there is increased interest in Serbia from the UK. Infrastructure, obviously, UK export finance was following rather than driving. I think there's also new opportunities for mid-shoring in Serbia. UK companies now need to have new strategies on how to trade with the EU, and the advantage of Serbia is the stabilization and association agreement and the other agreements to other parts of the world, the Middle East, the Russia, the Far East. And so I am really quite hopeful that despite the present disruption, despite this gloomy period, that actually we're going to see more UK investment in Serbia and in the rest of the Western Balkans. So on that positive note, I will leave it and wait for you to ask me some really difficult questions.
Well, we certainly hope so, and having in mind your activity, I'm sure that results will ensue definitely. It's really amazing when you learn more about FDI in Serbia, that in 2019, IBM Global Location Trends have proclaimed Serbia the leader by the number of open jobs through FDI. The global leader, #1 in the world by the number of new jobs, creation of new jobs by the total number by the population compared to the population of Serbia. Then in 2019, FDI Intelligence, which is a section of the Financial Times, has commented that Serbia has attracted 12 times more foreign direct investment than was expected of it by the size of its economy. And the number of greenfield investments in 2018 was obviously 107, which is really, there you really see what a government can do when it is dedicated to a certain task. And definitely the government that we live with in various variations since 2012 is definitely dedicated to creating jobs. I think that is something by which the continuity of this government from 2012 will be remembered, creating jobs, some better paid, many less paid, but still creating new jobs. And I'm sure that a number of people in Serbia will be thankful for that. On the other hand, I was carefully listening to the expose of Mrs. Brnabić for her second appointment, and of the various topics in her policy statement when she became, again, Prime Minister. The rule of law was somewhere third from the end of the list. Contrary to that, yesterday, Mrs. Brnabić said that the primary goal is European accession in terms of foreign policy, and in that sense, that the primary goal of the next period will be improving rule of law. And the question to all of you, since each one of you, particularly Italy, Bologna is the creator of Western law. The University of Bologna, that's where law was created. And as EIB has vast experience in improving the rule of law. And as Great Britain is really the legal hub of the Commonwealth, what could we all do together to help the government really make a fundamental change in improving the rule of law? Because I'm sure that the results that are already very satisfying in terms of foreign investment would be replicated by domestic investment. There would be much more domestic investment, and you would be, Dubravka, financing many more small and medium companies from Serbia, which would open many more jobs than FDI can really open with all the support which the state is giving them. What do you think about that? What can be done to substantively improve the rule of law from your states or organizations?
Well, if you allow me, Milan, I will just briefly comment and then let Mr. Ambassador and, of course, the representative of UK Embassy. We have, the AB has conducted an analysis in February this year about impact of FDIs on economic growth and let's say the role of country income levels and institutional strength, and we have looked into the rule of law as well. So the findings that we actually reached is that there is a strong supporting evidence that better regulatory quality have a positive mediating effect on FDI. In other words, countries with higher regulatory quality compared to their income group peers benefit the most from FDIs because FDI impact could growth is positive and significant, mainly in the better performing countries where there is stronger rule of law. We also found evidences that countries with stronger rule of law compared to their income group peers benefit the most from FDIs, thus exercising a positive mediating effect on FDI. Rules and laws are set of agreements. This is how we have actually measured it, by which countries implement FDI policies and that protect future returns of investors. So stronger rule of law discourages market unfriendly policies and minimizes the risks. And of course, what you have mentioned is that that countries that develop from low starting levels of, let's say, income will progressively face stronger direct competition between local and foreign investment firms, right? While opportunities for demonstration effects will decline in that sense. So in contrast, stronger results for middle-income countries may reflect the fact that firms in middle-income countries are likely to have stronger motivation and capability to counter competitive challenges of FDIs and to use their higher absorptive capacity to attract and utilize knowledge spillovers. So what does that mean?
And Serbia is a middle-income country, right?
Indeed, indeed. So, and now comparing the middle-income countries with low-income countries and higher-income countries, that basically the benefits of FDIs do not accrue mechanically and evenly, let's say. So there is an inverted U-shaped relationship between countries' income levels and the size of FDI's impact on growth. So moving from low to middle-income countries, the effect gets larger and it diminishes, again, transitioning to high-income countries. Of course, that the absorptive capacity matters in channeling FDI effects, meaning that within country income groups, so let's say for middle-income countries, the countries that have better developed institutions relative to their peers benefit more from FDIs in terms of growth. So all those are actually evidence and evidence-based results. So with stronger and better rule of law and stronger and better institutions than what actually is the case, and this is actually quite a detailed analysis in the EU economic report of the EU that Serbia has just received. which did make some, let's say, criticism as far as the rule of law in particular, Serbia could have even higher impact of those FDIs, right? So hence, that it is very important that is in the focus.
Yeah, many more local investments, much more.
And many more local. Now, of course, that EIB as a group is committed to supporting the small and medium-sized enterprises here. And we have done so by channeling so far 1.8 billion euros, sustaining
to banks.
To the banks, yes.
Who then on better conditions, yeah.
Yes, who then on lend to SME, small and medium-sized enterprises, creating or sustaining close to 350,000 jobs. But the question is, could have there been done more even than that? And can you imagine then the impact? Of course that then, as a result, the transition would have been shorter, right? Of course that the benefit of
the average salary would be 800 euros or 900 euros probably. Really.
And this is the catch. Of course that acceding to the EU gives such a big impulse that cannot be compared with anything. But if on the other side the country does implement reforms, especially in the area of the rule of law, you could already have improved environment for investors.
Qualitative leaps.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
And probably less migration, right?
Exactly. This is what the surveys say that people want predictability and respect. And this is what many people, young people who are leaving the country, also complain about: the lack of rule of law and predictability in their lives. Carlo.
Milan, as you, I agree with many of the things Dubravka just said. And you were right, Milan. Yesterday, Prime Minister, during the conversation with Commissioner Varela, stressed that this government, her new government, will be more focused on rule of law than the previous one or the previous ones. I mean, Serbia has done a lot of good things on economy and public administration. She said a lot instead still needs to be done in rule of law. And there is no doubt that this is an area where progress have to be made. But first of all, in the interest of the Serbian citizens first, as the Serbian authorities themselves have pointed out, these reforms are necessary independently, I would say, from the accession process for all the reasons Dubravka pointed out. So, and the other things Prime Minister said yesterday is that a key goal of the government is to implement this reform to have an European Serbia. So, I mean, the vision is there, I would say. These are very good statements that we welcome very much. Now we will have to see in the coming months.
Do you, Carlo, believe that there is a change in heart in the government and that
I was going to
rule of law now?
No, I was going to mention this point right now, because now the question mark is about the level of ambition of the government. The government has, I would say, is in a very good situation, has a very large majority in the parliament, so it will be able, in theory, to deliver on many important issues. And I think that, as I was saying, the question mark is on the level of ambition, and therefore on its ability of the government to deliver. And this is what we are looking for. And in our view, there is no way to go ahead on this, then engage the Serbian government and work with them on the basis of this, I would say, strategic statement that have been made by Prime Minister already in her expose in the Parliament when she presented the program of her cabinet. In that occasion, she stressed very much the importance of the reform of justice, for example, that would be pivotal, for the negotiation for the accession. So they know what they have to do. I think that progress report, all in all, was balanced. Criticism, there is some criticism, but criticism is there to help, not to disrupt. To disrupt. This is how we see things. That's why we do believe that
that's what good friends do. They tell genuinely what they think.
Yeah, on the basis of what they need to do to improve themselves, to have better living standard, to have a better judiciary and other important reforms. They have to work. They have to do reforms, and I think that there is no, I would say, imposition from our side, generally speaking, the member states. I think this is a joint effort that has to be, when it comes to accession for negotiations, in our view, it has to be a joint effort. The candidate country has to implement the reforms that are necessary to go ahead, and member states, on their turn, they have to reward the achievements that have been made. And in this case, we need that some encouragement would be helpful in order to give this government, I would say, the right impetus to move forward with the negotiation for accession. And we have to start from rule of law, and without overemphasize, of course, because there are, in our view at least, other factors that we need to take in consideration, including the geopolitical ones when they come to some decisions, for example, opening on new chapters that we certainly support very much. But there are two main issues within that process. One is rule of law, the other is the dialogue with Pristina. On both of these, we expect Belgrade to do more on the basis of what they have already achieved.
I will, because we're coming slowly to the end of this session and the closing of the conference, I will just recall a case which I was learning about at UCL in London. And that is the Libyan Arab case, which was before a high court in London in 1984, when President Reagan ordered the rocketing of Gaddafi's house, and at the same time the freezing of huge money that was deposited in Libyan Arab Bank in London. So the question before the English judge was whether to release, whether to freeze that money upon executive order of President Reagan, and traditionally, of course, Britain has special relationships to the United States, or to preserve its rule of law and protect foreign investment of Muammar al-Gaddafi. And Muammar al-Gaddafi prevailed. And that is why London is the financial center of the world. So that is a lesson to be remembered and an inspiration if you want to bring money into your country. That is how people should behave. With this, I want to thank you very much. We really had a very interesting panel, I believe. And thank you to my distinguished panelists. And I hope to see you soon in person. With this, I'm closing this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Milan. Bye to all the guests.
Bye.